What do we got? Let me... Testing. I have vocal. Let me put on the old man's glasses here. Let's see, where am I? Testing. Okay. All right. What do we have? It seems like I have exhausted this subject. What else could I possibly add? Well, I talked about this drum in a previous video. I forget, 11, 12, 13, 14? The videos on snare drums. So I thought, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to dismantle this drum in a second. First of all, here's the drum I just played. Now to me it's a 6.5 by 13. 13 being my preferred size. 6.5 by 13 generally. And I showed you this drum in one of the other snare videos, right? I tried to show you some things about it. But I didn't show you the whole drum. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to put this up just a touch more. How's that? Can you hear? You know, people say can't hear you when you're talking. Testing. Here we go. All right, so I won't play the drum again because that'll kill the camera. All right, so here's what I'm going to. Here it is. Now, if you don't remember what this shell is or you haven't seen that video, I'll tell you in a second exactly what it is when I show you what it is. Now, as I'm sitting here playing it, it feels good. To my ears, it sounds good. It sounds like a really nice sounding snare drum. Should it be a nice feeling, nice sounding snare drum? No. Not if I go by all the industry hype of what a shell has to be, must be, and our shell is to give you the best possible sound. You know, I almost wish I didn't have to do this. Somebody commented on one of the videos, man, you've taken all the fun out of playing and buying drums. And I said, well, but why? Other guys have commented and they've said, man, this is like good to hear, but let me do that first because that has to do with the getting the snares off. So I'll take the screws out first. It's like some players don't want to hear this. They feel, you know, better off not knowing. Let me get this out of here. Here we go. All right. First, it did have 40 wires on it. Because that's the only thing I had left. I made 3 snare drums for the second of the snare drum videos, right? And as I was putting them together, I was starting to run out of parts. So, let's start with the bottom first. Why not? All right, quickly. Make sure it's on number 2. So, in the case of people almost not wanting to hear this, it's like it demystifies. Is that what it is? It demystifies. And then I have other people saying, thank you so much. You just saved me hundreds of dollars. But that's kind of the point. Save money, why not? Yeah, I didn't even have chrome lugs. All I had was some brass tension rods. Okay, the other side. There we go. I want you to see what this puppy is. Now, you got all these manufacturers out there implying that the sound of a drum is the shell. No, And as I've said before, numerous times, the reason you know that is because of Remo rototoms, traps, flats, any other frame type drum. Okay, and you know that when you strike a rototom, what are you hearing? You're hearing the drum head attached to a frame. There might be some resonant frequencies associated with the aluminum frame. Who comes to mind? Terry Bozzio likes to put his rototom frames on hi-hat assemblies and clang them, as it were. All right, this shell. This shell is only. I bought a 4x8 sheet of BFV bubble-free veneer from Oakwood, my supplier out in Michigan, where I normally get my veneer. And I didn't want to spend a lot of money. I got some oak, and then I cut it into 6.5-inch strips. I made a form with just a top and a bottom connected with a rod in between, and stabilized it, and just put a bunch of wood glue, just wood glue. Spread the wood glue across it, started it, and rolled the shell. When I ran out of veneer, 8 feet, took another 6.5-inch strip, just butted the seams together, glued it up, rolled it out, did that 3 times. Now the first time I did this was an experiment. If you've seen any of my other videos, the tabletop drum set, the last version of the tabletop drum set, where I'm using both the bottom and top shell, as it were, above and below the table, the plywood, the 6-inch drum. I thought, why do I want to go out and buy this? There's got to be something I can make a little 6-inch shell out of. And that was the first time I did this. I had some other veneer. I don't know if it was, I forget what it was. But anyway, I had some veneer left over, and just one strip on a 6-inch diameter, you can get a lot of veneer. And I made a 6-inch shell for that tabletop drum set. So if you look at that video and you say, well, it's a 6-inch drum, right? What do you hear out of a 6-inch drum? Basically, these are maple or another. What do you hear out of a 6-inch shell or drum? Out of a 6-inch head when it's tight? It's very staccato, right? There's not a whole lot of resonance going on, or sustain, I should say, because it's such a small head. Vibration is very fast. Very staccato-like sound, right? So I didn't need anything special for a 6-inch tom, I figured. So I wrapped up the veneer. That's all I did with this. I wrapped up the 6.5-inch. Now, I want you to look close. And do you see, when I ended up with my final dimension, it was thicker than 13 inches and a little bit, and I couldn't get the head to squeeze on. So I put it on the table saw, and I just took some down on each side. 1/8 of an inch, maybe 3/16 of an inch. So you've got 2 different dimensions here. You have about 3/8 of an inch thick here, and about 3/16 of an inch thick here, all right? 2 different dimensions on the shell. The shell is not round, and I'm going to try to show you right here. You see the bubble? Because the glue did not adhere in every place. I didn't have a vacuum press or anything. So you can see the bump. You see the bump in the shell? And you see the bubble right here? I can even press it down a little bit. All right, I'm going to go around the circumference of the shell. Another spot here I can see where it's up a little bit. It's not perfectly round. None of this is perfectly round. It's ridiculous. Here's another spot here. Yes, you can see the gap and the glue. So you've got bumps in the shell. Now watch this. Look at this. Oh, is it like on that side too? Yes. On that side, it's even worse on this side. Look at the gap in the plies. I mean, seriously, come on. It's like I said in the video itself. Here's where the seam ended up. I put a lug on the seam. And look how the pressure bent up the wood. See how it goes up here? This is not round. This is not round. The bearing edges are not perfect. All I wanted to do was get something set up so that I could get the heads on correctly. I know if I seat the heads at the apex, when I tension it, it's going to sound okay. It's going to sound fine. It's like I said on the video. Come on, man. I would not give this away, let alone sell it, but it sounds good. Why? Because if you can seat the heads okay, you get a good sounding drum. Some people just don't believe it. Here's the evidence. It's not round. The plies all over the place. The plies. And that's hard as a rock now. The glue is hardened. I can't do anything with that. Except me junk a bunch of glue in there and fill it up. It's not going to make it round. Look at the shell. It's not round. How can the drum sound good? Because the sound of a drum is the drum heads. And some people, it's like I just pulled the rug out from under them. And they're just slamming down on the floor and they're in shock and they're mad. They're angry. What did you do that for? You know the number of people who have commented on these videos in the last, when did I start this? A year ago? I think 2 years ago now, maybe. Since I started these videos. The number of people that have thanked me for this. Others challenge me and tell me I'm out of my mind. I'm not out of my mind. I just played you a drum that has a shell that is ridiculous by manufacturing standards. How did the drum sound good? There's no special snare beds in here. You know, I just brought them down wide because I knew I had to sink a 40-strand snare into it. But there's nothing special about them. I take them down on my router table a little bit at a time and then a little bit of sandpaper. That's it. Nothing special. I can't say anything special about this drum. Here's the one special thing that I can say about this drum. You know, this is the, what do they call it? The little train that could not? It does. Why? Because I can get the drum heads on it. And I can seat them at the apex of the collar and the flat. And I know I can tension it okay. Matter of fact, one of these lugs, not that it matters, they're spring lugs. But one of them, these are old Tomo lugs, somebody told me. I don't even know where I got them. I got them used somewhere. They were in a box in a drum store. The guy said, yeah, just pick out whatever you want. So I found 8 of them. One of them's all dented up. I don't feel it here. But I know one of them is. So I mean, there's nothing pretty about this drum. I think it's that one right there. Got dents in it. And I put 3 coats of poly on it just to give a little shine. Nothing special, but it sounds okay. Look at this. Even here's one gap. Look at that gap right there. That's in the snare bed itself. You know, and some of these gaps go right through, all the way like that one. This one here goes right through, one side to the other. Because I didn't have a vacuum press, and I didn't even care because I knew ultimately when this was done and it was hard and ready to go, look, I could press it in a little bit, but it's just glued together. And it's not compressed. I didn't try to make each ply one with each other through the glue with any kind of special. Ugh. See my frustration, my friends? Really. I'm not trying to rain on your parade, okay? I'm not trying to pee in your corn pops. I'm just showing you something that the manufacturers, they are lying to you about. They're lying to you. They've been forced to because of market conditions that began some decades ago. I told you where to go to find that out. I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but I know anybody that looks at this subject and knows the history of drum shells knows. They know. And I don't get into it. What I do get into is that I don't care what kind of a carnival barker you are and what you say about your shells in your catalogs or in your videos or whatever. This should not sound good. How can it? By the standards that are hyped out there. Now look, again, hype is to create a buzz about a product. Everybody hypes their products. But throughout this series, I tried to discuss this from the sense of ultra, super hype. Just saying things that you don't even try to back up with evidence. You just say it. And because it's been said, who was it, Stalin or somebody that said, tell the people a lie long enough and they'll believe it. So the companies have been putting this out there, the importance of a shell, to the total negation of all the drumhead companies that make all these different drumheads. Why? If everything is the shell, you make a drumhead, you sell it. But why do they still, I wrote this the other day in an answer to somebody, all the companies go out of their way to put all kinds of money and research into developing a drumhead that is as close to a calf head sound and feel as they can manufacture. Why? If the shell is so important, why try to imitate calf? Because the sound of a drum is almost all the heads. And the cylinder enhances or detracts from certain frequencies thrown off by the heads in the air column, bouncing around inside, thickness, density, whether or not it's finished on the inside, how hard, whatever the species is, or whatever material it is. Nuances, subtleties. You think if I had a nickel for every time I've said those two words in these videos, nuances and subtleties, gee, I'd have enough money to go out and buy a snare drum. It's like people don't hear me say it. They say, well, you're saying that a shell means nothing. I never said that. I never said that in a single video. But based on this, I know a shell doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. It certainly doesn't mean as much as all the companies like the trumpet. The drum sounds good because I've got decent heads on them. I've got good heads. The heads, I've got an Evans single ply Genera and what's that? An Attack snare side thin. So you got decent heads on it, and you get a decent sounding drum, as long as you get those heads to seat correctly. Now look, all kidding aside, there are some people who like to tell me that, hey, marketing is what it is, you'll never change anything. Okay, I can live with that. I can live with not changing anything. Matter of fact, I can live, I have pretty thick skin, I can live with anything, just about. But, why should I stay quiet about an issue that I know falsehoods are being stated about? And people, you go to a drum forum? I don't really go to them anymore, but when I was going to drum, discussion forums, and people say, or they ask, what's the best drum set for playing metal, for playing jazz, for playing rock? What's the best shell I can get for this? What do you think of this drum set versus this drum set versus this drum set? And all they really care about are the shells. I'm thinking, you gotta be kidding me. You should care about how the drums are mounted. You should care about the hardware. If you're gonna take the drum set out of your house and you're gonna use it, you're gonna set up, take down, set up, take down, you need to consider yourself with hardware, not drum shells. And that's why all the catalogs, all the drum companies put so much emphasis on hardware back in the 60s. Really, 60s, 70s, everything was hardware innovation. So little was said about drum shells in the catalogs. When did this all change? Why? Well, if this does not prove to you that a drum shell is not the most important thing in the sound of a drum, I don't think you can be convinced. What can I say? If you want to believe the falsehoods, that's entirely your choice. If you want to spend your money for top-of-the-line drums and you don't really care about hardware, you just think you're getting a better shell and therefore it will give you a better sound. People ask me all the time, well, why does a $500 drum set not sound as good as a $5,000 drum set? Because a $500 drum set has the least amount of money that they're going to spend on hardware, on mounting hardware, on lugs, the whole thing. It's not the shell. It doesn't matter if they were to use Luan mahogany or what do you call it, basswood, or any of the real light woods that they use for those. That's really not an issue. Put good lugs on it and everything else good and mounted correctly. And as you've seen in these videos, the sound is nice. The sound is nice. A lot of times the real cheap drum sets they use a real cheap mylar for the heads. It's very brittle sounding, dense, real easy. It's got no real decent flex to it. It's a cheaper version of the mylar, of the plastic that they use. So when you buy a $500 drum set, it's all the components together that lower the price as much as possible to start off beginners with something. When you go up, of course nobody sells drum shells with plies all messed up like this, out of round and everything else. Come on, having to take down, good grief. This is the Frankenstein drum. That's what I called it in the other video. But, come on. There are obvious differences, even cosmetic differences. They don't put decent finishes on $500 drum sets. So as you go up the line, maybe they'll take more care of the shell and how the shell is manufactured. But I just showed you it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. Unless you've got a shell. This shell is not perfectly round, but nor is it an egg shape either. There comes a point where you could get a shell that's so out of round, you can't get the head on it correctly. No matter which way you put it, it's a round, it's a circular head, and if your shell is way out of round, it can't fit on. So obviously, you're not going to be able to tune it. But with today's manufacturing techniques, you'd be hard pressed to find a shell that's that far out of round that you can't get a head on it. Now, what they will do, as I said before, they'll put really inexpensive, fast, just an inner 45-degree, edge on it, little maybe touch the outside edge, a little bit of sandpaper. And the problem is that kind of an edge can sit back here in the collar, depending on the dimension of the shell. So now you can't get the flat and the collar apex. You can't get that on the bearing edge correctly on some shells that just do that inner 45. Just a little bit of sandpaper on the outside. But it's fast. Yeah, done. Zoom, sandpaper, out the door it goes. Okay, there's not a lot of care put into it. But if you put some care into the bearing edge, and you put good heads on, and you put proper lugs and whatnot, the nuances and subtleties from shell to shell, species to species, even material to material, it's lost when you get in a band and you have a band all around you, let alone the size of the room you're in and all kinds of echo going back and forth. What was the last time you ever, I don't go to concerts like I used to, but when I was young, went to concerts, coliseums, arenas, I never heard a decent sounding drum set. How could it, between the mics and the PA and just the sheer size of the room, drums, they just sound like, they're drums. But there's no articulation to the sound. About the only difference that I ever heard was Carl Palmer's stainless steel single-headed toms. Those, I could tell, were different than all the other drums that I heard from all the different bands back then in the arenas and the coliseums and outdoor festivals, whatever, where you've got enormous PA systems. By the time the sound of that drum set naturally goes from itself, out microphones, into PA systems, out in the air, bouncing around or just drifting out into nothing. So anyway, I keep saying this is the last one. This is it. Cut, stop. If I come up with anything else, then I'll put it up. But look, come on. There's no way that this snare drum should sound like a good drum. There's no way. Not if the shell. Not if the shell means everything that the manufacturers say. So hopefully I'd like to put this to rest, and I'd like to have people say, you know what? The next time I do go to buy a drum set, I'm going to concern myself with something other than the shells. I'm going to concern myself with the hardware and a finish that I like, you know, and one that I would be happy to sit behind and look at. I walk around the drum set. People tell me, all these drums, you heard me doing my faux bass drum here with the snare drum, all these drums are all covered with leather. That doesn't affect the resonance and sustain of the drums at all. Leather. It's just glued on with I think spray glue is what I used it. That's what I used on these, spray glue. Rolled it on tight, put the lugs on, done. Cool. I like the finish. Cool, embossed leather, and it doesn't affect the sound at all. So why are these people out there saying it matters whatever kind of special finish they put on the outside or special wrap or something? No, it doesn't. All the activities going on the inside, on that inside ply. Now you look at that inside ply on this drum. Okay? You see the seam right there, and you can see can you see it? Got the lug on the seam. I don't want the seam to come apart. Not that it matters with this drum, but for the sake of that, I put, and the other seam also has a lug on it, on the outside seam, right here. Otherwise, when you look at that, what do you see? You see oak. That's all. You see a layer of oak. I did not put anything on the inside of the shell on this. I just left it naked. There's no finish, no tongue oil, nothing. And as I'm sitting here playing this drum, thinking, this drum sounds really good. I mean, this drum sounds nice. It's got had pretty good sensitivity, almost all the way out to the edge. I usually use a little bit of dampening. I'll just lift it off in this case, so there's a lot of boing, a lot of ring. I just left it natural. It shouldn't sound good. To my ears, it does sound good. Because the sound of a drum is the heads. It's mostly the heads. So look, take this information, do what you will with it. However you spend your money is, like I say, every video, it's your wallet. You spend your money how you want. But the sound of a drum, cylinder, 2 membranes, or one or two membranes, tensioned. The membranes are throwing off sound waves. They're bouncing around in the air column on the inside of the cylinder. And the density of the shell, the hardness, will determine how the frequencies thrown off by the heads are enhanced or maybe detracted, softened, or whatever. And their nuances, their subtleties. You get your cymbals clanging and you get in the middle of a band. No. And you get all these drummers, young drummers, that they're nervous. I don't know what to buy. What do I buy? What shell do I buy? What bearing edge do I buy? It's a shame. It's a real shame. I appreciate the time that you take to watch, and any blessings that you receive from this, encouragement. I get people all the time that write comments, I thought this for years, and all I do is get into arguments with people because they don't believe it. So they thank me for putting it out there. Listen, to me, this is evidence. It's evidence to my own ears. My eyes tell me one thing, my ears tell me another. So I'm going with the evidence. I'm going with the observable, methodical evidence of doing it. I could make an entire drum set like this. I'd spend a lot more money on veneer. I have to get more than one 4x8 sheet, especially for a big set. But I could make an entire drum set just rolling veneer like this. Staying within my tolerances, so I didn't have to put it on a table saw, take this down, go a little bit smaller to get the thickness I want. Interior dimension, go smaller. I could make an entire drum set like that, And I know that if the bearing edges allow the heads to seat correctly, I'm going to have a great sounding drum set. That's the bottom line. I'm going to have a great sounding drum set. If I did this, just wrapped, bubbles all over the place, not perfectly round, I know I'll have a good sounding drum set. Because the sound of the drum is mostly the heads. Oh, I appreciate it so much. Thanks for taking the time to watch this. Comment if you will, agree, disagree. That's okay. Sometimes we can, we have to agree to disagree. But if you're going to say that I'm crazy, do more than that. You don't just say I'm crazy and I don't know what I'm talking about. That's trolls come in and do that kind of thing. Don't waste your time. Don't waste anybody else's. If you think I don't know what I'm talking about, show me. Give me the evidence. I want evidence. This is evidence to me. Give me evidence. And the drum companies don't even try to provide any. They just say it all. That should be a dead giveaway right there. If it makes that much difference, why don't the drum companies take a tom from each line and strike them all and say, here are the differences? Why don't they do that? They can't do that. There aren't any great differences. Maybe differences in the quality of the finish, quality of the lugs, quality of the hardware, options in the hardware, things like that. But the sound, nope. So I appreciate it. Thanks for watching.